Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining. Today's webinar is sponsored by Weave and is the 2023 Dental Business Insights Report. My name is Ryan White. I am the Senior Manager of the Dental Vertical, and I'm excited to talk with you today. Before we get started, I just want to do a few housekeeping items. For those that are live, if you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll be able to get to them. Hopefully, we'll see them right away, but if not, we'll leave time at the end to answer those questions. And if you're watching on demand, you can, and there is a chat bot also you'll see on the web page in which you're viewing, and you can also ask any questions which come up at that time period, and we can get those routed. Okay, let's talk about the 2023 Dental Business Insights Report. It is already February, and I'm just completely still shocked that we're already in the year 2023. It feels like I've been working in 2022 for so long, getting all my plans, getting everything up and running, and here we are already 2 months into 2023. I'm excited to share with you today some of the insights that we got from a yearly report that we do. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do. We're going to talk about where we've been as far as the dental industry, specifically where it was last year, 2022, and where it's projected to be in 2023. Some of the trends that have been identified, both through the research as well as a lot of interviews that have been conducted with customers, how these offices are adapting in 2023, and then additional insights that we will get into. So my background actually is in marketing research. And so I'm going to nerd out for a little bit and talk about how we gain these insights from this report. It was done through an independent marketing research firm, and over 117 dental providers were surveyed and were able to get their responses. With over 700 patients were also surveyed to get the patient side of their response and what the patient's view and expectations of the dental industry and their dental providers were. A great report. We also saw it on the medical side and the opto and vet, but dental by far had the most amount of providers, as you can see, 117. So the immediate finding we saw was that 2022 literally was seen as a very pivotal and transformational year. And there's a number of topics that really dived into why it was considered a transformational and pivotal year. The main topics that kept coming up over and over again, both in the research as well as in interviews that I would have with offices all over the US throughout all of last year, were staffing challenges. And they predict that it's still going to be a continuing challenge throughout 2023, as well as the rising costs due to inflation. Inflation, and it's not only the rising costs that patients have now incurred in their regular life, but now the rising costs of the businesses and the products which dental offices are using as every business adjusts to the inflation. And as well as one of the other big trends that just kept coming up over and over again is just how competitive the market feels right now, and that shifting competitive landscape. As there's more consolidation, as more dental businesses can not only consolidate, but move into various areas, there seems to be more this feeling of stress and this feeling that is more competitive than it was 5-10 years ago. And so that is driving a lot of practices to be looking forward and put in strategic initiatives on how do I stand out from the competition. So the first and foremost thing I want to talk about was practices and businesses in general are feeling pinched economically because of their own, because of inflation and the impact it's had on their own personal lives, as well as the lives of the operation of their business. They now are paying higher costs for products than they were, ever. And likewise, they're battling that question of how much of this cost do I pass on to the patient? How much do I really push on and increase my prices? Do I need to increase my prices? And what we're seeing from that is there's about 38% of practices that said they increased their prices in the last 90 days. And 42% of practices say they plan to increase them throughout the course of the year, with 51% of people also saying that they may raise them. So we've seen a lot of practices already saying the inevitable, that there is as inflation has continued to play a toll on their business, they've had to find ways to pass those costs onto their patients, or find different ways to add value to justify some of the strategic initiatives that they're pushing into this next year. So with that feeling of that pinch, not only from their own business standpoint, but they're also feeling it from patients, that they feel patients are feeling more pinched than they have been because of inflation. Now, dental has always been a a vertical in an industry which does much more buoyant in times of recession because it is a basic need. But they are seeing, and I've seen those feedback, that patients are delaying care. They're delaying treatment, or they're trying to push treatment down a little bit further and push it and procrastinate it. Or if they're not delaying the treatment itself, it's been that cost factor of it. And more practices we're seeing are implementing some form of payment plans. In fact, 35% of dental providers are opting. Sorry, that was the wrong stat. We've seen an increase, 42% in patients in the implementation of either buy now, pay later, or credit, in different financing options within the treatment plans. And so that tension that is being brought in by the economic forces outside the control is a common factor for all dental practices. So one of the key trends that we noticed, and the one I'm excited to talk about, is this can be seen as a challenge, that patients are raising the bar for small practices. The reason why it can be seen as a challenge is that patients' expectations are changing. And as patients' expectations are changing, a lot of practices take it as a challenge of, what do I need to do to provide to fit those expectations? Because we know that an unhappy patient is really just a patient whose expectations weren't met. And so as those expectations are being raised, the level of service and the level of care that dental practices are seeing that they have to provide to these patients is raised as well. And it does put a little bit more stress on the day-to-day operations of it. But a lot of practices are actually finding this as a great way to actually stand out. And that as they really stand out as a patient-centric office, a patient first, and in really finding ways to bring in patient engagement, make sure the patient knows the value they are, using various technologies to continually be in communication with the patient, actually having technology that the patient sees, everything from digital scanners to lasers, etc. The modernizing of the practice has become a very marketing distinguished factor that practices are using to show patients that they are also raising the bar, and that they can expect greater care from their practice. So it's one that you have loyal patients that have been with you for 5, 10, 50, even 20 plus years. And we're starting to see even those patients that have been with the long term are having more expectations and getting more used to technology and implementing technology in the dental practice. I call it a key trend. I love it because as 32% of patients expect more since the pandemic, this is providing dentists a unique challenge and also opportunity. I like using the word opportunity instead of challenge, because challenge sounds so negative, but really it comes down to opportunity to rise up. That as 48% of small practices say the quality of their care has improved. So as expectations have increased on the patient side, practices are responding and saying, because of their expectations, because of the changes, and even 2 years ago, because of the COVID-19 changes that were being forced to be made, these practices are improving and they're getting better, and they're providing more and more quality services for their patients, including extra measures and personal touches before and after the appointment, during the course of the appointment, and really building their patients' loyalty. Because as you provide more care and more engagement, they're seeing that these are the patients that they're increasing their loyalty with. And then therefore the word of mouth and the referrals are increased. And they're seeing that they are being distinguished as a patient first and patient centric office. So I don't like using the word challenge, but one of the opportunities is, how in 2023 can you provide a more patient-centric office, a more patient-centric experience? How can you distinguish yourself? Because pricing is always going to be a factor, especially at 2023 with the economic downturn, pending recession, tension. The question then becomes, if it's not going to be a battle of price, what can we do to provide value? So one thing that a lot of practices are doing is modernizing their practice in various ways, whether it be in the operations, the processes, sometimes it's technology. But the idea is, we need to keep patients loyal. And what are some of the tools that I can help increase that loyalty? Because 78% of patients feel they haven't switched in the last year, which is great. That's the type of retention you want. If you're a dental practice, you want to keep 90 90+% if possible of your patients on a consistent yearly basis, because it takes away that need to find consistently new patients and how much effort, how much money goes into that process. One of the ways that a lot of practices are actually really excelling in the last few years is they're gathering feedback. So they're using the reviews not only as a marketing tool to say their practice is a 4.7 star practice, et cetera, but they're visibly or going into those reviews on a consistent basis, looking at that and treating it as a survey results from patients. And then they're actually applying that feedback. And a lot of times I've had a lot of conversations with practices that say, when we get a review that has any sort of feedback in it, we immediately we evaluate it, and then we actually reach out to that patient and we ask how we could be better and what other steps we can make. And then they use that as advice and little consulting nuggets on what they can do to improve their practice. And then most importantly is trust. 88% of providers think that patients lie to them during the appointments. We all know this. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with the office manager and I asked the question, so do you feel the patients lie to you? And they all just roll their eyes like every day, all day long. I mean, even on the simple things, do you floss? Oh yes, I floss every day. And as they bleed profusely. The idea behind that is, where is the trust between the patient and the doctor? And the hard part about that is, how do you build your office in such a way that the patients are willing and want to trust and be open and honest communication, and they can create those personal experiences that really connect those the patient and the doctor, and the patient and the treatment, that helps them continue on their whole treatment plan. And so building loyalty helps that build that continual trust. And a lot of that is doing through the consistently evaluating the patients, reviewing, asking for their input, and then showing the patients that you're listening by applying that input, reaching out, having additional communications post appointment, whether it be phone call, text, or even I've seen a lot of doctors that are starting to more engage with the post-appointment follow-up, reaching out on a personal basis if it's a larger case especially, and really making sure that they're feeling valued and treated. So number 2, this is a fun one. I'm going to call it key trend. Staffing challenges show up. The staffing challenges that have shown up in these last couple of years, they don't show any sign of letting up. Now that isn't entirely pessimistic. The first thing you see is you're like, oh, no sign of letting up. That sounds great. It's just going to be a challenge that's going to forever be on. What that means is there's not an immediate point in which that problem is going to be solved, but we're going to see gradual instances or gradients of how that is being addressed throughout the time. So one of the things we did ask in this report to patients is, what expenses have increased for you over the last year? And you see the variety of expenses that have gone through. A lot of it happens with their daily basis, technology, utilities, rent, hardware, etc. They are seeing, this is to dental practices, and what are they paying? What expenses are being increased on the dental side? And then we did it on the patient side, and we're seeing patient have that similar correlation. So as wages continue to be a factor, because it feels like the cost of running a business has increased, and therefore patients or the employees' cost of lives have increased as well due to inflation. How are you trying to drive higher? How do you retain current staff and hire new staff? That has been an ultimate question. Unfortunately, one that doesn't have an easy answer. And so some of the indications of the best way to at least try to create that culture and create less stress within the job is, let's try to make their job simpler. Try to make it as easy as possible so that they don't feel as stressed. And it's just another factor of that. It's not only that they feel like they aren't being paid properly, but they also feel they don't enjoy their job. There's so many things in their job that just cause frustration and just more and more stress being built upon each day. So removing as many tedious tasks as possible helps alleviate a lot of that stress and lets them focus on the parts of the job that they feel they are making a difference, the parts that they enjoy. Specifically, one that kept coming up over and over again is the patient intake process, and how big of a change this has happened in the last 5-10 years. The trend to going digital, shifting the expectations of having the patient come into the practice, then get the clipboard, fill out the form, and spend all that time in the fill form, has changed quite dramatically. A lot of practices are actually not accepting the new patient until their digital forms are filled out completely. Therefore, they're able to reduce the risk of errors and the amount of manual input that they've had to do over the years, as well as being able to use that time more efficiently as they put that task burden now on the patient, filling out their forms, doing it before the appointment, and being able to remind them continuously leading up to it. Once the patient is there, they're able to fully be engaged with that patient face to face. And it's not a lot of dead time of just watching them fill out a form. Another area is the insurance verification. This is another tedious task that a lot of offices are spending hours going through the websites trying to verify patients' insurance, or even on the phone with certain insurances. I won't name them, but we all know them. How much time is wasted because they are now glued and tethered to their desk in some sort of way, and they can't as easily break away and help address patients' concerns. So finding ways to reduce the pull of and the need of the insurance verification. Now we're seeing that there are automated tools that are leading towards that, as well as appointment confirmations. This has been one that's been over the last 10 years, just significant changes and strides in appointment confirmations. But the automating part of that process, the amount of time that has saved is always, as I talk to customers on a regular basis, that is one of the first things they mention, just how much time they save because they're not worried and continuously stressing about appointment confirmations, that it happens automatically. And all they need to do is just stay on top of it, keep ahead to make sure all their patients that are on today's schedule or tomorrow's schedule have confirmed. And as they look in that, they realize, oh, we've got 9 out of the 10 patients confirmed. Let me just have to spend a little bit of time just to make sure that last patient is good to go, and makes their day so much easier. Okay, the next key trend, software investment is critical in reaching multi-general patient bases. This one, 94% of providers agree that a text message reminder makes patients more likely to show up for their appointment. This isn't unique to the dental practice. Dental industry has actually been ahead of the curve in this area, where a lot of dental practices started implementing this technology 10 years ago. And now other medical industries we're seeing are starting to implement that and starting to increase, whether it be optometry, vet, audiology, podiatry, et cetera. But dental has really been ingrained on, we can really make this process easier. And the best part about it is, as dental practices have been in that flux of change for the last 5-10 years, patients' expectations have likewise been changing with it. And so patients are expecting those appointment treatment reminders. A lot of times there's a number of patients, especially younger patients that I've talked with, that they don't even put it in their calendar just because they know they're going to get a text from their provider. And they say, you know what, yes, 6 months, I'm good from now. I'll get a text. So they don't even worry about putting it in. And they actually are relying on that text message reminder to remind them to get it into their schedule. So the key of the crux of the matter is that software has been increasing its ability to help with your job, and software has made it easier and faster to keep up with patients and to keep them in the chair and keep them coming back. So practice owners are seeing that clear need to communicate differently with these multi-generational patients. There's still a number of their patients that are older that are not as used to texting, but even that is diminishing dramatically as a number of older patients are getting used to texting their provider and also getting those confirmation reminders. Now, digital forms might be another issue. If you are in an area with a much older patient base, there have been pushbacks on digital forms, and that that a number of those patients don't ever get to them because they're just not used to it. It's not convenient for them. But that is something we're going to see shift and continually change. And so the idea is to continually push those changes of practice, because as you do so, the preferences of patients continue to grow with it. One of the things that 61% of providers typically use at least 3 separate technologies to communicate with patients in one way or another, whether it be reviews, texting, phone, et cetera. And so now we're finding, as we survey these people, 1 in 3 providers feel they should really only need 1 to 2 of those programs. So looking to simplify your job, looking to simplify the procedure, or simplify the number of consolidate the number of vendors that you're using has become an easier matter, because now office managers and those that are working with those technologies don't need to worry about going to 3 or 4 different programs and softwares to accomplish the need that now we're seeing is being consolidated into several just companies that can do it all. So the key opportunity here for you as a practice is simplify the communication process. Simplify, simplify, simplify. And that's across the entire patient journey with pre-appointment, post-appointment, during the course of the office. This you can be doing through automation. We talked about the appointment automation reminders, but there are also the digital forms automations, the review process that's automated afterwards, and utilizing templates for messaging, not only just for texting, but also for scripting and other continuous calls that you're making throughout patients, using those templated ways that you can get the bulk of what you need to say and then personalizing it from there. So what you need to do is really revamp your morning to-do list. When you update to new software, training the staff is key. So as the whole staff really buys into the software and the processes, it becomes so much easier and everyone gets on sync. So it helps you improve a number of areas within the process, including the recall improvements. So as you focus on reaching out to current patients consistently to keep that retention high, to keep that loyalty, it doesn't have to be time consuming. You might get much quicker, much more simpler. And lastly is streamlined the payments. One of the areas that I talked about earlier was as economic strains have continuously been pushing on patients' minds, they're starting to delay treatment. And one of the factors that they're delaying treatment is they feel the economic burden and they can't commit financially to a treatment at that moment. So what we're seeing now is a lot of practices starting to implement different payment plans, different financing options. And as you do so, being able to get that information conveniently to the patient, training your staff to talk about when do you talk about finances, how early in the process, and making sure that people know that you have the option for financing plans and payment plans. And so it doesn't always have to be everything paid in full at the point of the appointment. And so as you simplify the process and start communicating in a very simple manner to your patients of those new options that are available, that is when you can continue to keep that retention, keep patients within their treatment plans, et cetera. So one of the quotes I wanted to share, that as people worry about gaining new patients throughout the course of 2023 as it's competitive landscape, and one of the best ways is to not worry so much of new patients, but see what opportunity you have within the existing patients. One of our consultants that we use all the time and great customer, Deborah Nash, talks about the importance of focusing on loyal patients who have been visiting your practice for 5 years or more, and really urging that practices should be reviewing unscheduled treatment plans with the intention to ask the right questions of these patients. What has prevented you from moving forward? And that might be the areas where you're finding, is it a financial concern? Is there something else? And what can you as a practice do to address and work with this patient, build trust with them, and make sure that they're getting the treatment that they need? It's a lot harder to find a new patient than it is to find a patient that has been existing and just not living up to their treatment plan. And so putting your effort as you find that you have less time to reach out to new patients, focusing on the existing patients you have, building that retention, that trust is going to go a long way, especially as the economic turns are on everyone's mind. So there's a number of other things I'd love to get to. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We actually did run out of time, but I encourage you, if you haven't read the full report, go ahead and go to getweave.com/ebooks, and you'll see that there's broken out by industry, and the dental one specifically, it's about 10 pages long. It is not long. It is more than 10 pages, 16 pages, but it goes through very specific results from the survey that we were able to see from this third-party research department. Ultimately, it comes down to three things. What are you doing to engage the patient more fully? How do you increase the retention in your practice? And how do you address the shifting preferences of these patients, whether it be payments and financing or just their expectations on how you communicate with them? In 2023, you're going to continue to see some of those challenges and things that are out of your control being headwinds towards your growth. But as you focus on the patient, developing a patient-centric office and building loyalty within your existing patient base, that is the best way you can combat some of these issues that are out of your control. If there's any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. There's a great question. So one is, their concern is about HIPAA compliance on using digital intake forms and insurance verification. That is a great question. As long as you're using a HIPAA compliant vendor, that is actually, love to talk about your, let's see, Amen. If you can just send some of your contact through, I'm going to private message you. I can give you more information about that. But ultimately, digital forms are the way to collect the information. And as long as it's done, the digital form is done on a secure server, it is the same as if you were transferring it from pen and paper to your own system, because ultimately the information does live within the system and the server itself. And so as long as it's done on that secure server, you should be okay. And the insurance verification, likewise, making sure that you are utilizing the providers and that the provider information is being shared. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Once again, 2023 can be a year of great growth as long as you're focusing on the right areas and putting your attention and your efforts in areas that are going to increase your patient engagement, increase your opportunities of treatment with existing patients, and ultimately building trust and loyalty. Those will pay dividends as you continue to. Those patients will then become sources of revenue, as not only sources of revenue, but sources of referrals and continual loyalty to your practice. Okay. If you haven't gotten the ebook, please get it at getweave.com/ebooks. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day.